It's Saturday night at Dallas County Jail, what some of the staff call rush hour. It's a total madhouse with maybe 300 people checking in that night. People are dragged in shouting and screaming. Some have bags placed over their heads after spitting at guards. Some are strapped into a chair because they're out of their minds on some substance. If you're part of that crowd, you'd be first booked in. And that means having your fingerprints taken and having to answer a few questions. Do you feel hopeless, you're asked? Which seems like a strange thing to ask, but how you answer these questions will depend on where you're sent. As you'll see in this show, some parts of this jail are much worse than others. Welcome to one of America's most feared jails. So you've been booked in and searched from head to toe. You've got your set of clothes, a grayish striped uniform that you could be wearing for some time. Where you'll be sent depends on what you did and how you answered those questions when you were being processed. On any given night, people might arrive after being arrested for murder, assault, theft, disorderly conduct, and a long list of other crimes. But the main reason people end up at Dallas County Jail is drugs. The entire complex is massive, with 3 main towers serving as the places where people will be incarcerated. While a lot of people just call the place the county jail, these 3 towers together go by the name of the Lew Sterrett Justice Center Complex. If you looked out of your mind when you were brought in or have a history of mental illness, you'll likely end up in the West Tower, which is the mental health facility. That place holds around 1,500 inmates. If you're believed to be extremely dangerous, then you might go straight to the maximum security part of the jail, which is called the North Tower. And if there's nothing that special about you, you could end up in general population, which is the South Tower. The North Tower holds about 3,300 people and the South Tower holds about 2,300 people. In 2019, the police said they had about 6,100 gang members on file in Dallas, but that's only the people they knew about. The actual number of people in gangs is much higher, of course. What this means is that at any time there are a number of gang members in this jail, and that means rivalries. For this reason, members of the same gang might find themselves sharing the same cell. It's in the maximum security tower where you'll find a lot of these gangs. A day in one of these cells can often be hectic, and the cells are often searched, something called a shakedown. The special unit of guards that do this dress in armor that makes them look like RoboCops. They rush into the cell and demand everyone get down on the ground. Guards are armed with non-lethal weapons such as pepperball guns, which will be used if any prisoner doesn't follow commands. They search the cell and leave it in a total mess. They take no chances, and even sometimes call this part of the jail the jungle. If men do get out of hand, they might find themselves in one of the isolation cells. Just walking down the corridor where these cells are located is not a pleasant experience. Men bang wildly on the doors, scream obscenities, shout about human rights abuse and how they're losing their minds in there. They remain in the cells with no books, no newspapers, alone with a stone bed, a toilet, and 4 walls. They might get just a few days in there or a long stretch, depending on the seriousness of what they've been accused of. For 1 hour, 3 times a week, they can leave that cell, and that's it. Sometimes the inmates just lose their minds and paint the walls with their own natural waste. After that, they might have their cells burst into by armed guards and painfully get tied up. If they don't quit acting out, this might lead to a stint fastened in a chair with a bag over their head, something that looks quite medieval. Maybe you can get a job as a trustee because you're a well-behaved kind of guy. But as any Dallas County Jail trustee will tell you, one of the downsides about this job is cleaning those cells that have been painted with human excrement. Those trustees also have to be always on the lookout for inmates trying to squirt them with that other liquid form of human waste. The jail is supposed to have gotten better over the years. A decade ago, a former guard wrote a book called Covered Up about her experience working there. She said she witnessed things that you would not believe. She described one instance where a bunch of guards beat a mentally ill inmate housed in the West Tower for no reason at all. They beat him badly too, while all the time the man screamed in pain. In that book, she states every possible violation of human rights went down in those towers, including murder. The sheriff's department was, of course, not too happy about the publication of the book, even though the former guard didn't use any real names. The lawyer for that department said that at the time, she should have reported any incidents when the guards broke the rules, but it was too late once she had left the job. The South Tower is somewhat different, and that's because it contains something called direct supervision units. This can mean a great big space with around 60 inmates, something called a pod. In this part of the prison, around 60% of the guards are women, and sometimes there might just be one guard for all of those 60 men. These pods look quite clean and modern. Days might pass in the pod without any fights, but they can break out and they break out fast. There's not much one single female guard can do when scores of large men are fighting, but she can press a panic button and soon a response team will be on the scene. Tempers sometimes just bubble up. And the worst days for some men is after they have been finally sentenced for their crime. Staring down at 15 years in prison can get to a person. Most of the people don't have money for expensive lawyers, and often their public defender will take them to a plea bargain, fight the case and lose and get 30 years, or take a plea bargain and get 12. Plea bargains in the USA are somewhat controversial. The media reports that 90 to 95% of felony convictions are the result of plea bargains in the US. Does that mean that 95% of people charged with a felony are guilty? Not at all. But some people in jail don't think they'll win their case even if they're innocent. The U.S. National Registry of Exonerations reported that around 15% of people imprisoned but then exonerated because they were found to be innocent had actually pled guilty. That goes up to 66% for people wrongly convicted of drug crimes and 49% for the crime of manslaughter. Sometimes, people are looking at a mandatory minimum, and while innocent, their public defender will just tell them that even though the evidence against them isn't all that strong, if you lose, you're truly finished. Another reason to accept a plea bargain is just to get out of jail faster, since just about any convicted felon will tell you jail is worse than prison. Take the plea and you could be out of court in a couple of minutes with the knowledge that you're leaving jail to do a hard time in a prison. Fight the case, and you might spend months or years in jail fighting your case and then get a really bad result, and that's why it's sometimes called the devil's bargain. There is no doubt that this can be very rough justice for some people. We're not trying to say jail is full of angels and innocents, but you can only imagine how a person must feel when told to accept a plea bargain and they're innocent or at least not guilty of everything they've been charged with. This is another reason why a quiet pod might just go off one day when one prisoner has had a bad day in court or a depressing chat with a public defender. But then take into account that after all this, you suffer at the hands of some rather unpleasant guards or inmates. It's what's called a vicious cycle of events, and a reason why jails can be awful places. We should also mention something else that seems ethically wrong that goes down in jail. We can give you one example of this, but it happens all the time. A person is arrested for a misdemeanor, maybe something like public intoxication or being an annoyance. We imagine some of you have been guilty of this at least once in your life. They end up in court very soon after and are told they don't have to go to jail if they pay the $500 bail money, but they don't have that kind of cash because they're poor. Well, then it's back to jail for them. This recently happened in Dallas, and the American Civil Liberties Union wrote about it, saying it was actually illegal. This is what they wrote about this particular case. The jail is transparent about the fact that it values money over civil rights. It maintains an ATM for people to get cash to post their bail. Shannon didn't have the money, and because she's transgender, the county put her in solitary confinement. For days, she was isolated in a cramped cell 24 hours a day and denied contact with other people. In Dallas County, 70% of people in jail are awaiting trial. They're presumed innocent until proven guilty and yet are sometimes forced to endure extreme conditions. There are bail agents who can help with the fee, and you might pay installments, but they charge for that. The person might fall behind on payments and they get trapped in a cycle of debt. People are fighting back. And in 2018, citizens who'd been jailed in Dallas sued officials. They said they'd been unfairly jailed because they were poor, and that was unconstitutional. It should be pointed out that a short stint in jail can lead to the loss of a job, and maybe even a house. It can create havoc if that person has a family. The ACLU also said in the same story that because the conditions inside the jail are so bad, a lot of people just plead guilty to get out of there. If you are just 17 in the state of Texas, you will be tried as an adult. So this means you can end up in the Dallas County Jail when pretty young. The teens are segregated from the older prisoners and put in cells in the West Tower. They're separated because of the real threat of varying types of abuses. The problem is, they're really strictly segregated, and so they remain mostly in their cell or in the tank, which contains a group of cells. Because there's nothing to do when these kids go out into the open space of the tank, they tend to argue and fight. If they get caught doing that, then they might go to administrative custody, where it's just them alone in a cell with a Bible and a bed. That might last for days. And there's evidence that solitary confinement for kids can cause a lot of mental damage, more so than in adults. Dallas County Jail does seem to have improved over the years, and after years of failing inspections, it turned a corner and started passing them. Bad things still happen. In 2017, one man beat his cellmate to death just because he wasn't happy about the other man's use of the shared toilet. The victim had only committed his first crime in his 50s but was said to be mentally unwell. His cellmate, on the other hand, had a very long history of violence. In this case, the authorities were criticized for putting the two men together. If you enjoyed this episode, then we've got 2 more we know you're gonna love. Click on either the video on the left or right for another great episode of the Infographics Show right now.